Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Grant County Election Forums for 2014. I'm Alan Miller. Tonight's discussions are brought to you by the Marion-Grant County Chamber of Commerce, the Chronicle Tribune, Hoosier AM/FM Radio, and WIWU TV 51, from where we are broadcasting live at Indiana Wesleyan University. Our first forum tonight is going to focus on the two candidates for Grant County Sheriff. Reggie Nevels is the Republican candidate, Larry Shaw the Democrat candidate. Each of the candidates will have a 2-minute opening statement, and alphabetically, we begin with candidate Nevels.
Good evening. I'd like to thank Mr. Miller, Mr. Pentecoff, and Mr. Thurman. I'd also like to thank Marion Grant County Chamber of Commerce for hosting this forum. I would also like to give a sincere thank you to the residents of Grant County for supporting Team Reggie in the primary election, which allowed me to be here on the evening of this beautiful campus of IWU. I am a native of Grant County, born and raised in Marion, Indiana, and I'm a proud graduate of Marion High School class in 1979, and a 1983 graduate of Ball State University with a Bachelor of Science degree in the field of criminal justice and correction. I have been employed with the Grant County Sheriff's Department for over 30 years. I have worked under 4 different sheriff administrations, those being Sheriff Ron Mallory, who opened the door for me to launch my career in law enforcement, Sheriff John Lawson, who allowed me to expand the work release program in the inmate work crews to help save taxpayer money, Sheriff Otis Archie, who allowed me the opportunity to attend Baxter School of Lie Detection, which is the #1 polygraph school in the nation, Sheriff Daryl Heimlich, who has allowed me to further my investigation training, not only in polygraph examiner, but as a detective sergeant in the investigation field. My knowledge base and training extend to numerous investigation schools inside and outside of the state of Indiana. I've always been an active resident in Grant County, serving on numerous boards of directors in the community. It is evidenced through my education and experience that law enforcement and the safety of the residents of Grant County is my passion. I am prepared to become the next sheriff of Grant County. I humbly ask the residents of Grant County to continue to allow me to become the next sheriff on November the 4th, 2014. And I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nevels. And now, with a 2-minute opening statement, the Democrat candidate, Mr. Larry Shaw. Candidate Shaw.
Thank you. Thank you to the Marion Grant County Chamber of Commerce, to WBAT, the Chronicle Tribune, and Indiana Wesleyan University for allowing this forum today, and also to Mr. Nevels for being here. My name is Larry Shaw II. I'm a lifelong resident of Grant County. I graduated from Marion High School in 1988. I then attended Ball State University and received my Bachelor of Science degree in criminal justice and graduated from there in 1993. For the past 14 and a half years, I've been married to my lovely wife, Angela. I have 2 great stepdaughters, Emily and Ashley Brown. They've both graduated from Eastbrook. Ashley is a freshman at IPFW and Emily is a sophomore at IU right now. I am a member of the St. Paul Catholic Church. After I graduated from Ball State, I was hired on at the Marion Police Department in 1994. For the past 20 and a half years, I've served in the capacity at the Marion Police Department. I've grown in my field of law enforcement. I started out as a patrolman. I then went on to be a field training officer, training the younger officers that hired on. I then was lucky enough to be assigned to the Gene Team Drug Task Force, where I worked there undercover for a year and a half. Most recently, for the past 8.5 years, I've been assigned to the Criminal Investigation Division, where I've worked crimes against people. In that capacity, I've had the privilege and honor of attending numerous hours of training, those including homicide investigation and sex crimes investigation. I feel that I have done all I can to be prepared for this position, and I look forward to serving you as the next sheriff. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw. Our panelists tonight who will be asking all of the questions of the candidates are Ed Thurman, who is the news director of Hoosier AM/FM Radio here in Marion, and David Pentecoff, who is the editor of the Chronicle Tribune. The format we're going to follow: when a candidate gets the first question, He will have 2 minutes to answer. The other candidate will have a minute to respond, and we will go on that alternating basis. Mr. Pennicuff is going to ask the first 2 questions. First, Mr. Nevels, 2 minutes, Mr. Nevels, and then Mr. Shaw will have a minute to respond. David?
Okay. Reggie, you also serve as a Marion City Councilman, in addition to serving as a deputy for the Grant County Sheriff's Department. For a while, you took both insurance for your part-time, health insurance for your part-time job as a city councilman, as well as taking health insurance for your full-time job as a deputy. Why did you take both insurance?
That is correct, Mr. Pennicuff. I did have 2 insurance. I had a primary and a secondary insurance, which I paid for both of them. And I was advised to take both insurance due to the fact that I was employed by the city. So if something happened to me while I'm working for the city, then therefore I have city insurance. And if something happened to me regarding to working for this county, I would have county insurance. That is correct.
Okay, but your health insurance would have, if you were hurt while you were doing something on behalf of the county, your city insurance would have covered that as well, correct?
Well, once again, I had a primary and secondary. I do not know which one will cover first, but
Okay.
I absolutely have primary and secondary insurance with both the city and the county.
Okay. And
Yeah, Mr.
I would
Shaw,
like you to respond to
Response to
whether or
the
not
first
that's,
question.
you think that's appropriate.
Personally, I do not think it's appropriate. You know, depending on who you talk to as far as the insurance crisis that we've experienced at the City of Marion, when you're $5 million in debt due to the insurance, I don't think that was a wise decision. I can tell you that if I am elected as your next sheriff, I will not have both insurances. So that's my standpoint.
Okay.
Mr. Pennicuff, question? Mr. Shaw, and you will have 2 minutes, Mr. Shaw, to answer the question.
If you're elected, Mr. Shaw, what individual do you plan to rely on most for advice should you be elected?
Right now, that is open. There are quality individuals at the Sheriff's Department that I know personally. If I am elected that position, I will probably go through a screening process to see which one of those officers, one of those deputies that I'd want to rely on as far as their knowledge and expertise to help me in my investigative ability. There are lots of quality deputies at the Sheriff's Department. I've worked with them when I was on the Gene team. I worked with them when I was on the road as a road officer. I've worked with the detectives at the Sheriff's Department in my current capacity. There are quality individuals there, and there are many to choose from. It's just a process if I will sit down and basically have an interview process with them to see who I would want as my confidant as far as providing me with the best advice.
Who's your confidant during your campaign?
Right now, the best person that I can rely on is my father. He has been with me the entire time. He has guided me and talked to me. In times when I've had no one to turn to, I've talked to him. He's been a great support. I've also relied on my chairman, Del Garcia. We went to high school together, and we've went through the police department for almost the entire 20 years together, and I really depend on him for his advice on what I should do.
Mr. Neville, 1 minute. Who you would turn to for advice?
Well, my Lord and Savior. That'd be the best advice I can get. Thank you.
All right, next question from Mr. Thurman for Mr. Nevels, and again, you will have 2 minutes, Mr. Nevels.
All right, Reggie, which is more important, in your opinion, concerning the role of sheriff? Is it the role of administrator of the department or the role of lead crime fighter for the county?
Well, it'd be the role of administration. That's what the sheriff position consists of. is to make sure that all personnel is in the right position to continue making the Sheriff Department moving in the right direction.
Would you get involved, though, in investigations when need be?
No, we do have an investigation team that's capable of continue doing what, the Sheriff Department investigation team consists of, but I would just make sure that our administration, the supervisor that's in charge of that division, report to me if he needs to tell me if there's anything I need to know.
Mr. Shaw, 1 minute response, whether you would be a law enforcement officer or an administrator, as I understand the question.
I think it's a combination of both. Your main focus is an administrator. The sheriff's office is responsible for a multi-million-dollar budget. It is the job of the sheriff to make sure that that money is spent properly. Every dollar that comes out of that is taxpayer money. So as an administrator, you have to make sure that the public is getting the best service for what they're paying. On the other hand, you have to be a law enforcement officer. If a major crime happens, there are quality detectives, but ultimately it's going to be your face in front of a camera that has to explain why this crime isn't being investigated properly or what quality stuff's being done. So it's a combination of both. You have to be an administrator, but you have to have that law enforcement background. So when there's a time, you have to step in.
Mr. Thurman, a new question from you to Mr. Shaw.
All right, Larry, now both of you have extensive experience in law enforcement, but what is the top quality that you possess that sets you apart from your opponent?
Well, I believe it is my investigative ability and my fiscal responsibility. I serve as the police department pension secretary. I've served in that capacity for a number of years. That responsibility, I oversee a $1 million budget with the City of Marion, and that is to pay the retired members of the 1925 PERF Fund. I'm proud to say that those members get paid on a monthly basis and everything runs smoothly. I have to report yearly to the state of Indiana as far as the money that's being spent, and I have to prepare a budget and turn that in, and that's part of the budget process that the City of Marion goes through. Law enforcement-wise, I think I am a top-nose investigator. I don't want to toot my own horn, but when it comes to crimes against people, I am very passionate about investigating crimes against children. That is something that I want to reach out to the local communities and offer the assistance of the Sheriff's Department to help those smaller communities investigate those crimes. It takes a specific person that wants to sit in a room and look across the table and look somebody in the eyes and say, you've done something to your child and you need to pay for it. There's not a lot of people that'll do that. That's something that I take extreme pride in, and I look forward to the detectives at the Sheriff's Department lending their resources to the local communities to help investigate those crimes the best we can.
Mr. Nevels, 1 minute response. Remember the question?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Yeah, well, first of all, 30 years of service at the Grant County Sheriff's Department speak for itself. I had worked for 4 different sheriff administrations. I had learned from each one of them. And I'm going to use that information to help me continue the progress that we have there with the Sheriff Department.
I think I have the next question, and I believe it goes to
Mr. Nevels.
Mr. Nevels.
Okay.
And I'm going to ask a question that's it is a hypothetical question based on a real incident. If you were sheriff and a situation happened in which a sheriff's deputy was drunk driving, and that sheriff's deputy struck another car and injured another person, would you release the details of the investigation that surrounded that, given that sheriff's deputy was with other law enforcement personnel in the time before the accident, and that sheriff's deputy died in the crash, if we asked you for information about what happened in the time leading up to that crash, even though you legally wouldn't be required to provide it, would you provide it?
Mr. Pentecoff, regarding to that particular incident that I know you are referring to, after the investigating agency complete their investigation, one thing that my administration will make sure that we do have an open door policy and be truthful with everyone that's involved. But I cannot release any information until it has been completely investigated. And once after that, then I'm willing to answer any question that anyone may have of me or my staff.
So once the investigation was completed, which it was in this case, even though, state law does not require, obviously no one is going to be tried. Unfortunately, the individual involved has died, you would still make the information available to the media or to the public if they asked.
That's absolutely right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Shaw, response, 1 minute.
Yes, I would. Law enforcement is held to a higher standard than the general public. We can't ask somebody in the public to obey the laws if we don't obey the laws. That's the number one thing. There has to be an open policy like that. If something, I don't want to look like there's something being covered up. If there's nothing being covered up, I've got no problem. We should be held to a higher standard than the normal person on the street. And if somebody doesn't like that, we're in the wrong line of work. So I have no problem inviting you in and letting you look at an investigation if it would involve one of my deputies in the future. Thank you.
Mr. Pentecoff, you have the next question for Mr. Shaw.
Yes, sir, Mr. Shaw. If the jail population continues to grow, it's consistently running over its capacity right now, is there any way we can avoid building a new county jail?
Yes. I am opposed to building a new jail. It's going to cost millions of dollars, which the county does not have. I see no foreseeable future where the county will have that type of money. Short term, my plan is to reach out to all law enforcement agencies and start issuing citations to misdemeanor nonviolent crimes. You're driving while suspended, you're shoplifting. Those people can be cited into court, given a court date instead of incarcerated in jail, trying to bond out and increasing the jail capacity. That will be the short-term answer. With the change in state law, they no longer accept level 6 felonies. It's the old D felony. They will no longer be accepting those at the Department of Corrections. That's slowly being phased in over the next 2 years. Right now, that's not an issue, but in 2 years, that's going to be an issue. Those are people that will be sentenced to 1 to 3 years that we're going to have to keep at the local level with no relief from the state. And that is going to cause a problem in and of itself. Long term, I want to work with the judges, the prosecutor's office, the probation, and other law enforcement agencies to start doing threat assessments as far as how we can deal with those individuals and get them out of the system, home arrest, day reporting, something before they go to trial. That's the long term, but it's going to take a team effort, and I look forward to sitting down with all of those agencies and trying to come up with it. But it's going to happen because it's going to be a major issue in the coming years. Thank you.
Mr. Neville, your 1 minute response on the future of the Grant County Jail.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Miller. We are currently working with the justice system regarding to the jail population. We currently have advisory committee. We work closely with the judges community correction will play a vital role in reducing the jail population. And that does consist of house arrest, day reporting, and I think by us continuing to work with community correction, which will play a vital role in reducing the jail population, I think that we will not see the problem that everyone projects.
Thurman, you have the next two questions. First for Mr. Nevels, and a 2-minute response, Mr. Nevels.
Reggie, in the past
Yes.
few years, the word meth has become a household word. We've seen it just explode onto the scene. What, as the top crime fighter in Grant County, as sheriff, could be done to help wipe out this, or at least ease the problem that we've seen in the past few years? What can you do about it?
Well, number one, I wish that we could, wipe out all drugs activity, all drugs dealer. But let's face it, in this society, we have to deal with those issues each and every day. We do have a Gene team, and we do have enough personnel on that team to continue to do the best that we can do to fight the drug problems that we are facing.
Mr. Shaw, your response?
I was on the Gene Team Drug Task Force in the early 2000s. Back then it was crack cocaine and marijuana. Just as I was leaving, meth started being talked about. Meth is a major problem that's affecting Grant County beyond belief. It takes some highly trained officers to go in to deal with those scenes. As a former Gene Team officer, when I was there were 3 deputies from the Sheriff's Department at the Gene Team. Currently, there are only 2. As your next sheriff, I will put a 3rd deputy back over at the Gene Team because drugs are the #1 problem as far as all crimes concerned. Almost every crime that happens, you can link back to drugs, and I will be committed to that fight.
Okay. Mr. Thurman, for what will be the last question in the Sheriff's Department forum this evening, for Mr. Shaw.
Larry, is a central dispatch system needed for Grant County? Why or why not?
Well, they say by federal law, that's the way we're going. I would have to do the research. I know that still in the planning stages that they're talking about central dispatch. I want to be 100% sure that we have the right location and it's not going to cost money to go to central dispatch. They've talked about the bank at 3rd and Washington being a possible location. Here recently I've heard that they're talking about moving probation from the D-home and moving it to the bank and central dispatch into where the probation department's currently at. I would like to be involved in the process, and whoever is the next sheriff needs to make that decision as well. That needs to be put kind of on hold until there is a new sheriff to have an input. You're going to have to look at how much it's going to cost. Is it going to be cost efficient? Does it meet federal standards? It would be terrible to move both the Marion Police Department and the Sheriff's Department into a central dispatch, and then a few years later they tell us that the building does not meet federal code and you're forced to build a new building, which ultimately means then the taxpayers are going to have to spend millions of dollars to build yet another building. We need to slow down. We need to make sure that if there is going to be a central dispatch, that it's not going to cost any money and that it meets all the federal guidelines so that a few years down the road, we're not going to have to be forced to build a new building.
Mr. Nevels, your response.
Okay, thank you. Well, central dispatch will become a reality. Sooner or later that all the law enforcement agency will participate in one dispatch. And as you know, the county official did purchase a building, the old Salem Bank, which is structurally sound. That is the ideal place to place a central dispatch once the fundings are available and once we be able to get everyone on board, because the only one that I know for a fact that's currently on board is the Marion Police Department and the Grant County Sheriff Department. So with the other agencies, we need to work closely with them to make sure that we have one central dispatch that will benefit this entire county.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw. Mr. Nevels, for your answers, paying attention to the time clock. We have now come to closing statements, which are 1 minute each. Mr. Shaw, we will let you begin with your closing statement. 1 minute.
Once again, I'd like to thank everybody for having us here. It's great that we live in a country where we can sit down and do this. I just want to let the citizens of Grant County know that it's been an honor during this process to go around and talk to everybody to see what your thoughts and your opinions are of what it takes to be the next Grant County Sheriff. I think that my qualifications have proven to me and to most of the people that I talk to that I am that person. I also want to encourage everybody to vote. My father served in Vietnam. He's seen a lot of people die in Vietnam. The greatest thing we can do to honor the veterans in this community is to go vote. If you don't vote, it's a disrespect to them. So show the men and women that serve this country the highest form of respect. And November 4th, I urge everybody, no matter who you vote for, to go vote. Thank you.
Mr. Nevels,
All right,
1 minute.
Thank you. What is important to me is your safety, your security, and the service extended to you by the Grant County Sheriff Office. I will continue to work hard for you because I am responsible, I am respectful, and I'm ready to become the next Sheriff of Grant County. So I appreciate your vote on November the 4th, and I'm looking forward to the outcome. Thank you very much.
And thanks to our candidates, Larry Shaw, Reggie Nevels, candidates for Grant County Sheriff in the November the 4th election. We're going to continue after this short break with our second forum of the evening featuring the two candidates for Grant County Prosecutor. Stay tuned.